For me, a moment that stands in stark, vivid relief against the tapestry of my life was watching my sister, Veronica, and our mother, Margaret, step into the welcome reception for my new $960,000 home. This wasn't just a house. It was a monument built from every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of relentless determination I had poured into founding my IT company. Despite the triumph, a familiar knot tightened in my stomach and my skin began to crawl, because I recognized the look in their eyes. It was the exact same expression of calculated appraisal I had seen when I was 18, on the devastating night my entire world imploded. Growing up in Boston, our family presented a picture-perfect facade to the outside world. My father worked in finance, my mother ran a chic little boutique, and they had 2 daughters and a lovable golden retriever named Rusty. But as the old adage warns, appearances can be profoundly deceiving. The first cracks in this pristine veneer appeared when I was 12. Dad walked out on us, and while the divorce itself wasn't a spectacular explosion, the fallout from it laid a toxic foundation for years of pure, unadulterated family dysfunction. Veronica, my senior by 3 years, went on to marry Daniel, an investment banker from a wealthy, established family. Their wedding was a lavish affair, for which Mom spent over $50,000 she simply did not possess, justifying it with the tired argument that a daughter only gets married once. I was 19 at the time, juggling 2 jobs and attending community college, barely managing to scrape together enough money to buy my own bridesmaid dress. Then came the babies, in quick succession, James, then Freya, and finally Caleb. With the arrival of each child, Veronica's sense of entitlement grew exponentially, and Mom was always right there, ready to facilitate their needs, frequently at my direct expense. "Your sister has 3 children to provide for," Mom would say with an air of finality. "What do you possibly need extra money for? Textbooks. Can't you just borrow them from the library?" All the while, I was working myself to the point of utter exhaustion. Scholarships were a godsend, but without any meaningful family support, my life became a relentless cycle of work and study. I was a barista in the early mornings, a private tutor in the afternoons, and a data entry clerk on the weekends. Sleep was a luxury I simply could not afford. Dad, after moving to Chicago and starting an entirely new family, gradually faded into the background. To be fair, Mom made it exceedingly difficult for him to maintain a connection with me, conveniently forgetting to tell me when he called or accidentally deleting his messages. But I persevered. While Veronica was busy posting glossy photos of their idyllic family holidays, I was staying up all night, fueled by cheap coffee, learning to code and poring over my textbooks. I graduated as the valedictorian of my class. Mom did attend my high school graduation, but she left early because Veronica called in a panic. James had a minor fever. I never once complained. I had accepted this skewed dynamic as my unchangeable reality, and it only fueled my resolve to forge my own success, entirely on my own terms. I didn't need their validation. What I never, ever anticipated was how drastically and cruelly things would shift on the very day I turned 18. That single night set the course for everything that followed, culminating in the dramatic showdown in my new home 14 years later. My 18th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I remember the day of the week because I had miraculously managed to get the evening off from work, a truly rare event. I wasn't naive enough to expect a grand celebration. Veronica and Daniel were expecting their third child, Caleb, and as usual, they commanded the entire family's undivided attention. Still, turning 18 felt significant. I was now legally an adult. I had graduated high school at the top of my class, and I had secured partial scholarships to 3 different universities. When I arrived home after my tutoring session, I found Mom and Veronica huddled over the kitchen table, completely absorbed in a sea of spreadsheets and financial documents. They barely bothered to look up. "There's some leftover lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry," Mom murmured, her eyes glued to the papers. I heated up a plate and sat down with them, my curiosity piqued. "What are you two working on?" I asked. Mom finally looked up, just trying to figure out some financial matters. "Veronica and Daniel really need a bigger house now that Caleb is on the way." I nodded, this kind of conversation being the background noise of my life. But then a sudden, icy chill snaked down my spine. "Why do you have my college acceptance paperwork?" Veronica let out a dramatic, long-suffering sigh. "We might as well just tell her, Mom." Mom smoothed out the papers and looked at me with that familiar, placating gaze that always preceded a demand for me to make some kind of family sacrifice. "Lena, we need to have a talk about your college plans." With Veronica expecting again, they desperately need a 4-bedroom house. Daniel's annual bonus wasn't as substantial as they had hoped this year, and they find themselves a bit stretched financially. I remained perfectly still, a cold dread washing over me as I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. "The thing is," Veronica chimed in, "we've run all the numbers. And even with Daniel's salary and Mom helping with the down payment, we're still coming up short." "Short for what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though I already knew the answer. "We need to use your college fund," Mom stated plainly, as if discussing the weather. "Frankly, it's not as if you don't already have scholarships. And community college is a perfectly respectable option. You can always transfer to a university later on, when things aren't quite so tight for the family." My college fund, the money my father had painstakingly started for me before the divorce, the money Mom had sworn would remain untouched for my education. I was depending on that fund to cover the significant gaps that my scholarships didn't. "But that's my money," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Dad set that aside specifically for my education." Veronica rolled her eyes with practiced disdain. "Don't be so selfish, Lena. We are talking about a home for your niece and nephews. Where are they supposed to sleep? Should little Caleb have to live in a closet just because you want to attend some fancy university?" "That's not what I'm saying at all," I insisted, my voice gaining strength. "But I have worked so incredibly hard for this. I have maintained a perfect 4 GPA while working multiple jobs. Those scholarships don't cover everything. You can take out student loans, just like everyone else," Veronica snapped. "Daniel and I have a mortgage. That's just part of life." Or, Mom added, "you could simply live at home and continue at the community college. That would be a much more economical choice." Something inside me fractured then. A lifetime of quiet acquiescence and dutiful acceptance shattered, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated outrage. "No," the single, simple word hung in the air between us, heavy and defiant. Mom blinked, clearly not expecting any form of resistance from me. "Excuse me." "No," I repeated, my voice stronger this time. "That money is for my education. Dad and you set it aside for me. It is not Veronica's personal house fund. Mom's expression hardened into a tight, unforgiving mask. "This is not a negotiation, Lena. This is what is happening. Your sister has a family to provide for. And I have a future to build," I retorted, my voice cracking with the strain of unshed tears. "I have earned those scholarships. I have worked my fingers to the bone while maintaining perfect grades. I deserve to use my own college fund for college." Veronica let out a cold, contemptuous laugh. "Oh, please. As if you know the first thing about real responsibility. Try having 3 children before you lecture us on what you think you deserve." Tears threatened to spill over, but I fought them back with sheer will. "This is not fair, and you both know it." Mom shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "My priority is my education," I said. "That's not wrong." "Well then," Mom said, crossing her arms in a gesture of finality, "if that's going to be your attitude, you have a choice to make. You can either accept that the money is going to help your sister, or you can pack your bags and figure out life on your own. You are 18 now, after all." The ultimatum hung in the tense air. Veronica smirked, utterly confident that I would capitulate, just as I always had. But something fundamental had cracked deep within me. All the years of being second best, of having my needs and dreams deferred for Veronica's, had finally reached a breaking point. I stood up slowly. "I'll pack my bags." The look of utter shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I hadn't been consumed by a wave of paralyzing fear. Mom clearly had never imagined I would choose independence. "Don't be so dramatic," Veronica scoffed. "Where would you even go?" I didn't bother to answer. I walked numbly into my bedroom and pulled out my largest suitcase. I began packing mechanically, stuffing in clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and my most vital documents. The family photos on the walls seemed to mock me. They didn't feel like they were mine anymore. Mom appeared in the doorway just as I was zipping the suitcase shut. "You're being ridiculous. Sleep on it, and we can discuss this rationally in the morning." "There's nothing left to discuss," I said, surprised by my own sense of calm. "You've made your position perfectly clear. Now I'm making mine." I pushed the suitcase past her, grabbed my backpack from its hook by the front door, and stepped out into the cold night air. No one called out after me. No one made any attempt to stop me. That night, I slept in my beat-up car in a Walmart parking lot, using my work uniform as a pillow. For 2 long weeks, that became my new reality. I juggled my 3 jobs, slept in my car, and showered at a local gym where I had a cheap membership. I didn't tell a single soul. On the 15th day, my computer science teacher, Professor Clara Hughes, found me asleep in a quiet corner of the university library. She woke me gently and asked if everything was all right. Something about her kind, concerned eyes shattered my carefully constructed composure, and I told her everything. That very evening, she drove me to her own home and showed me to the guest room. "It's yours for as long as you need it," she said simply. "No one should ever have to face something like this alone." Professor Hughes became more than just a teacher to me. She became my mentor, my staunchest advocate, and the first person who ever believed in me without any conditions attached. She helped me find additional scholarships, navigated the labyrinth of financial aid applications with me, and provided a glowing reference for an internship that would ultimately change the entire trajectory of my life. Everything that transpired after the night I was thrown out was irrevocably shaped by that singular experience. It taught me the harsh lesson that I was, in fact, completely on my own. But it also taught me that the family you choose can be far more supportive than the one you're born into. Most importantly, it revealed a hidden well of strength within myself, a strength I never knew I possessed until I was forced to dig deep and find it. With Professor Hughes's invaluable help, I managed to secure enough financial aid, scholarships, and part-time work to enroll at a local state university instead of my original dream school. It wasn't Boston University, but it had a robust computer science program, and for that, I was profoundly grateful. My college experience was a world apart from that of my peers. While they were attending parties and joining social clubs, I was working a patchwork of jobs to stay financially afloat. I waited tables, worked at the university's IT help desk, and took on freelance web development projects late into the night. Sleep was a distant memory, and a social life was entirely non-existent. Despite my grueling schedule, I maintained a perfect GPA. The logic and structure of computer science came naturally to me, and I often found myself tutoring classmates who were struggling. One of those classmates was Isabella Tran. Isabella, a brilliant but perpetually disorganized artist at heart, became my best friend and eventually my business partner. We were in many ways complete opposites. I was methodical and structured. She was impulsive and creative. I excelled at back-end programming. She had an intuitive gift for user experience and design. Together, we were a perfect team. During our junior year, we started brainstorming an idea for a money management application specifically for young adults. Most of the existing financial tools were designed for people who were already financially stable, not for people like us who were living paycheck to paycheck. We saw a clear gap in the market and were fiercely motivated to fill it. Leveraging campus resources, we developed a working prototype. We called it Sens, an application that allowed users to visualize their spending habits, automate their savings, and build credit responsibly. Our professors were impressed, but more importantly, our fellow students found it genuinely useful. After graduation, Isabella and I faced a critical choice: take stable, secure corporate jobs, or take a massive leap of faith and pursue our startup dream. The safe path was incredibly tempting, especially given my history of financial instability. But I remembered Professor Hughes's advice. Sometimes the riskiest path yields the greatest rewards. We took the chance, moving into a tiny, roach-infested apartment to minimize our expenses. We dedicated ourselves completely to Sens. I coded for days on end, subsisting on ramen noodles. Isabella designed user interfaces until dawn. We attended every networking event, pitch competition, and startup incubator program we could find. What followed was 6 months of relentless rejection. Investors told us we were too young, too inexperienced, or that our target demographic was wrong. College students don't care about financial planning, one dismissive venture capitalist told us. But we refused to give up. Our breakthrough came in the form of a small business grant, which allowed us to hire our very first employee, a marketing specialist who helped us refine our messaging. We made a slight pivot, focusing on recent graduates burdened with student loans instead of current students. The app's user base began to grow, first gradually, then exponentially. We were featured on a prominent technology blog. A financial influencer with millions of followers endorsed Sens, and our user numbers exploded from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands. Throughout this whirlwind period, I occasionally thought about reaching out to my family. I had maintained almost no contact since that fateful night. Mom had called about 3 months after I left, not to apologize, but to coldly inform me that they had officially used my college fund for Veronica's down payment. Dad sent sporadic, guilt-ridden texts to check in, but our relationship remained strained and distant. So instead, I poured all my energy into my growing business and building my own life. The years flew by in a blur of code, investor meetings, and eventual, staggering success. Isabella and I moved Sens from our shabby apartment into a proper office space. We hired more developers, customer service representatives, and marketing experts. Sens evolved from a simple app into a comprehensive financial wellness platform. 5 years after we started, we received an acquisition offer from one of the largest financial technology firms in the country. The offer was astronomical, enough to make both Isabella and me wealthy beyond our wildest dreams. After weeks of intense negotiations, we accepted. I was 30 years old and suddenly possessed more wealth than I had ever imagined possible. The terrified 18-year-old sleeping in her car felt like a person from another lifetime. Financial security gave me the freedom to make choices out of wisdom, not desperation. I invested the majority of my windfall, established a scholarship for first-generation college students, and finally allowed myself to dream of having a home, a real home, not just a place to crash between work shifts. After months of searching, I found it, a beautiful craftsman-style house in an upscale neighborhood. At $960,000, it was a significant investment, but one that was comfortably within my means. The 4-bedroom home was filled with character and charm, boasting hardwood floors, large windows, a wraparound porch, and a spacious backyard. It needed some renovations, but I immediately saw its potential. As I signed the closing documents, I couldn't help but reflect on the bitter irony. 14 years ago, my college fund had been taken to help Veronica buy a bigger house. Now, through my own relentless work, I was buying a home worth nearly $1 million. During the renovation process, I received an unexpected message from my father. He had seen the news about the acquisition of Sens online and wanted to congratulate me. Our subsequent conversation was awkward, but it opened a door. He admitted that he had lost track of me after I left home and had been too ashamed of his inaction to try harder to find me. He had since divorced again and moved back to the Boston area. He asked if I would consider meeting for coffee. That coffee meeting was tense, but it was also a step toward healing. Dad apologized for his absence during my most difficult years. He confessed that he had known about the college fund situation, but had felt powerless to intervene against Mom. I didn't forgive him immediately, but I did appreciate his honesty. We agreed to focus on slowly rebuilding our relationship. It was during that conversation that he mentioned Veronica and Daniel were facing financial troubles again. Apparently, they had been forced to downsize after Daniel's company underwent a major restructuring. Mom, of course, was still helping them in any way she could. "They don't know about your success," Dad told me. I haven't told them. I just nodded, unsure how I felt about that. A part of me wanted them to know, to see that I had thrived not just in spite of their lack of support, but because of it. Another part of me preferred to keep my accomplishments private. As the renovations on my new house neared completion, I decided to host a housewarming party. After much deliberation, I included my family on the guest list. Isabella warned me that I was setting myself up for disappointment, but I felt it was time to close that chapter of my life, one way or another. I sent formal invitations to Dad, Mom, Veronica, and Daniel. Dad RSVP'd almost immediately with a heartfelt acceptance. Mom called, sounding surprised but agreeable. Veronica sent a curt text, looking forward to seeing how you're doing. We'll be there. The stage was set for a reunion I had never anticipated, one that would prove to be far more dramatic than I could have ever imagined. The morning of my housewarming party was bright and beautiful. I woke up early, despite having been up late putting the final touches on the house. Every room was perfect. The living room, with its plush sectional and custom-built bookshelves. The gourmet kitchen, with its gleaming marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The formal dining room that could comfortably seat 12. And the 4 exquisitely appointed bedrooms upstairs, including a master suite with a private balcony overlooking the backyard. Isabella arrived around 10, laden with champagne and decorations. "Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this?" she asked as she arranged a bouquet of flowers. "It's not too late to fake a sudden illness." "I need closure," I said, my stomach twisting with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. "Besides, there are only 3 people out of 30 guests. If things get uncomfortable, we'll have plenty of buffers." The caterers arrived at noon, setting up elegant food stations throughout the first floor. By 3 o'clock, everything was perfect. The food, the drinks, the music. My nerves, however, were completely frayed. My colleagues from the tech world were the first to arrive, followed by some of my new neighbors. Professor Hughes and her husband came. She embraced me warmly and whispered how incredibly proud she was. Friends from college, industry contacts, and my financial advisor rounded out the early crowd. At 4:30, the doorbell rang again. I took a deep breath and opened it to find my father standing awkwardly on the porch, clutching a gift bag. "Dad," I said, the words still feeling foreign on my tongue. "Lena," he said, his eyes wide as he took in the house behind me. This is incredible." I welcomed him in, gave him a brief tour, and introduced him to a few people. He seemed genuinely happy for me, if a little out of his element amongst the successful tech professionals filling my home. "Your mother and sister should be here soon," he mentioned. They were planning on coming together. I nodded, grabbing a glass of water to steady my hands. "And how are they?" Dad hesitated. "Daniel's job situation has been hard on them. They sold their big house last year and are in a townhouse now. Margaret, your mom, helps with the kids constantly." Before I could process that, Isabella appeared at my elbow. "More guests are here," she said, her eyes communicating a warning, "including, I believe, your mother and sister." I took another deep breath and walked to the front door, and there they were. Margaret, looking remarkably unchanged by the 14 years that had passed, and Veronica, still beautiful but with fine lines of stress etched around her eyes. Behind them stood Daniel, looking much older and more tired than I remembered, and their 3 children, James, now a teenager, Freya, a preteen, and Caleb, who was around 10. "Lena," Mom said, her tone carefully neutral. "Thank you for inviting us." "Welcome," I said, stepping back to let them in. "Please come in." The children hung back shyly, clearly having been coached on their best behavior. I smiled at them, realizing with a pang that I barely knew my own niece and nephews. "There's a game room upstairs if you get bored," I told them. "Second door on the right." That seemed to break the ice. James asked if I had a gaming system, and when I confirmed that I did, the three of them scurried upstairs. "Beautiful home," Daniel said after a moment, looking around with a professional, appraising eye. "The architectural details are very impressive." "Thank you," I replied. "The renovation took 6 months, but it was worth it." 6 months? Veronica raised an eyebrow. "You must have had quite a team working on it." "I did," I said simply, not elaborating. "Would you like a tour?" As I led them through my home, I watched Veronica's expression shift from polite interest to a more calculated assessment. She ran a hand over the granite countertops, peered into closets, and commented on the expansive play space in the backyard. Mom followed more quietly, making occasional remarks about a piece of decor or asking about a specific feature. "This must have been quite an investment," she finally murmured as we stepped into the master bedroom. "It was," I acknowledged, "but I've been very fortunate in my career." "What exactly is it you do now?" Veronica asked, perching uninvited on the edge of my bed. Dad mentioned something about an app. I gave them the condensed version of my success story, watching their faces morph from polite curiosity to stunned disbelief. "You sold your company for millions." Veronica asked, her voice an octave higher than usual. "We did," I confirmed. "The timing was right." The tour concluded back downstairs where more guests had arrived. I introduced my family to Isabella, Professor Hughes, and a few colleagues who knew fragments of my story. During the introductions, I saw Mom and Veronica huddling in corners, whispering intensely. Daniel seemed to detach from their conversations, instead engaging genuinely with some of my tech industry friends. About an hour into the party, I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate this new chapter with me," I said. "This house represents more than just a place to live. It's a milestone I once thought was impossible to reach. I'm so grateful to everyone who supported me along the way." As I finished my brief toast, Veronica stepped forward. "As Lena's sister, I'd like to say something, too." Her voice had that smooth, confident tone I knew so well from childhood. The voice that always came just before she got exactly what she wanted. "Family is everything," she began, placing a hand on my arm. "And seeing Lena's beautiful home today has made me realize how perfect this would be for our family." A ripple of confused murmurs went through the guests. "What Veronica means," Mom interjected smoothly, "is that we're all so proud of Lena for creating a space where the whole family can gather." "No," Veronica said, her grip on my arm tightening. "What I mean is that this house would be perfect for my family. With Daniel's job situation and the kids needing to be in a good school district, we've been looking for exactly this kind of home in exactly this neighborhood." The room fell dead silent. Even the caterers stopped moving. "Veronica," Daniel started, his face flushing with color. "This is not the time or the place. It's the perfect time," she insisted, her gaze fixed on me. "Lena has always wanted to help her family. She's single, she has no kids, and she's clearly doing very well for herself. This 4-bedroom house is just wasted on one person when we have 3 growing children who need space and stability." Mom nodded in solemn agreement. I stood there, frozen, scarcely able to believe what I was hearing. After 14 years of virtually no contact, after they had stolen my college fund, they were now standing in my home, not just asking, but expecting me to hand it over to them. "Lena," Mom said, her voice adopting that authoritative tone I remembered all too well. "You need to pack your things and find somewhere smaller." A condo downtown would suit your lifestyle much better, and this would mean the world to your sister's family. Veronica was already pacing the living room, pointing out the changes they would make. James can have the bedroom with the bay window, Freya would love the purple room, and Caleb will have so much space for his toys in the smallest bedroom. Mom joined in. After everything Veronica has been through, she deserves this. It's the very least you can do as her sister. The room had gone completely, uncomfortably still. My guests were staring, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination. Isabella had moved to my side, a silent pillar of support. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange, surreal calm descend over me amidst the sheer absurdity of the situation. "I have something I'd like to show you," I said quietly, taking out my phone. I used my smart home system to connect my phone to the large television screen in the living room. With a few taps, I pulled up a document and projected it for everyone to see. "What is this?" Veronica asked, a note of unease in her voice. "This," I said, "is a restraining order I had drafted 14 years ago after you kicked me out on my 18th birthday." The room gasped as the legal document filled the screen. Even the caterer was frozen in place, holding a tray of appetizers. "What are you talking about?" Mom's voice cracked the silence, a blend of confusion and indignation. "We never kicked you out. You chose to leave." I kept my voice even, years of boardroom negotiations paying off. "You gave me an ultimatum on my 18th birthday. Accept that my college fund was going to Veronica's down payment or pack my bags." I packed my bags. "You didn't stop me." "That was a family disagreement, not an eviction," Veronica scoffed, her eyes darting nervously at the screen. "You're being overly dramatic. I slept in my car for 2 weeks," I stated simply. In February, in Boston, a low murmur rippled through my guests. My father stepped forward, his face ashen. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said softly. "You never told me. Would it have made a difference?" I asked. He had no answer. I swiped to the next document on my phone. "This is more interesting, though. This is the reason I had the restraining order drawn up." The screen now showed a series of credit reports and loan applications, all in my name, all dated from just after I had left home. "What is this?" Daniel asked, stepping closer to the screen, his financial background allowing him to understand what he was seeing before anyone else. "After I left, someone opened 3 credit cards and took out a personal loan, all in my name," I explained. "They had my social security number, my birth certificate, all the personal information needed to bypass security questions. The total amount of debt was just over $45,000. Mom's face had gone completely white. Veronica was suddenly very interested in the contents of her wine glass. "Fortunately," I said, "the detective who helped me was very thorough." The credit cards were used at stores that Veronica frequented. The loan money was deposited into an account that then transferred the exact same amount to your joint checking account, Daniel. Daniel turned slowly to face his wife. "You told me that money was from your mother, a gift to help us with the down payment." "It was," Veronica insisted weakly. "Mom helped arrange it, by committing identity theft against your own daughter." Professor Hughes interjected, her academic calm replaced by a protective fury. "That's a felony, in case you were unaware. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Mom began to stammer. "This is the police report I filed," I said, bringing up yet another document. I had more than enough evidence to press charges for identity theft and fraud. The detective was particularly interested in this loan application. I zoomed in on a signature line, where someone had attempted to forge my signature but had misspelled my middle name. Veronica's hand was shaking so badly she had to set her wine glass down. "If you filed charges, why weren't we arrested?" she asked, her voice thin and reedy. "Because I didn't go through with it," I said simply. "I was 18, I was terrified, and despite everything, you were still my family." So I made a deal with the detective. I would pay off the fraudulent debts myself, and he would document everything but hold off on prosecution. I swiped to another document. This is proof of payment. Every single cent of that $45,000, plus interest, paid off by me over the course of 3 years. Paid off while I was putting myself through college, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and eating ramen noodles to survive. All while paying off a debt I never incurred. Daniel looked physically ill. I had no idea, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Veronica told me her parents were helping with the down payment. As a gift, just one parent, I corrected gently, and it wasn't a gift. It was theft. Mom had finally found her voice. "You're twisting everything to make yourself out to be the victim," she seethed. "We have always done what we thought was best for you. Sometimes families have to make difficult choices for the greater good." "The greater good?" Dad asked, his voice rising with uncharacteristic anger. "Margaret, she was 18, our daughter, and you stole from her." Mom rounded on him. "Don't you dare judge me, Richard. You're the one who walked out. You left me to handle everything." "I left you, not our daughters," he shot back. "And I certainly never authorized you to steal Lena's college fund or commit fraud in her name." Turning to me, he said, "I knew about the college fund, and I am so sorry I didn't fight harder for you. But the credit cards, the loan—" I had no idea. I nodded, accepting his incomplete apology for what it was. Veronica, seeing her support system disintegrate, tried a new tactic. "It was a difficult time," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "We had a new baby, we needed a home. Mom was just trying to help us. And you weren't around for us to ask." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't excuse fraud." I swiped to one final document. "This might interest you too, Daniel. While investigating the identity theft, my lawyer uncovered quite a lot about your family finances. These are records of 6 failed business ventures Veronica invested in without your knowledge, using joint funds. The total losses exceed $200,000 over 8 years. Daniel's face was now devoid of all color. "What business ventures?" "Her college friend Megan's clothing boutique, a cousin's restaurant, a subscription box service for luxury pet products, among others I listed. All of them failed within a year. All of them received significant investments from your family accounts. Those were personal loans to friends," Veronica said faintly. "They were going to pay me back, with interest. Is that why you hid the statements from me?" The tension in the room was suffocating. My guests were looking for any excuse to leave, unsure if they should stay for what was clearly a private family implosion. "I think," I said, my voice ringing with authority, "that we've gotten off track. You came here today to demand my house for yourselves, operating under the assumption that I would once again sacrifice my needs for Veronica's wants. I am making it perfectly clear that that will never, ever happen again. So you'll just throw your own sister's family out on the street." Mom demanded, "Where is your compassion?" "My compassion?" I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Where was your compassion when I was sleeping in my car in the middle of winter? Where was your compassion when you stole my identity and saddled me with crushing debt before I'd even started my adult life?" Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. I am not throwing anyone out on the street, I said, my voice softening slightly. But I am not giving you my home. If you need financial assistance, I am willing to discuss setting up educational funds for James, Freya, and Caleb. They are innocent in all of this, and I would like the chance to know my niece and nephews. We don't need your charity, Veronica snapped, even as Daniel's expression said otherwise. It's not charity, I replied. It's family helping family, the right way. Mom grabbed her purse. I think we've heard enough. Veronica, children, we're leaving. The children are upstairs playing video games, I reminded her. And I think Daniel might want to stay. Daniel nodded slowly. I need to understand exactly what has been going on with our finances, he said, his eyes fixed on Veronica. The kids will be fine for a little while longer. Fine, Mom snapped. Veronica, let's go. As they headed for the door, Isabella stepped forward. I think that's for the best. This is supposed to be a celebration of Lena's new home, not a venue for attempted grand larceny. Mom's face flushed a deep, mottled red. How dare you? This is a family matter. Yes, it is, Isabella replied coolly. And Lena's chosen family is here to support her. You might want to think about what real family support looks like on your way out. After they stormed out, the party slowly regained some semblance of normalcy, though the conversations were now dominated by the dramatic scene that had just unfolded. Daniel remained, speaking quietly in a corner with my financial advisor, periodically checking his phone as texts from Veronica no doubt flooded in. Later, as the last of the guests began to depart, he approached me. I owe you a profound apology, he said formally. I had no idea about the identity theft or the bad investments. I knew about the college fund, but Veronica swore to me you had agreed to it. Would it have mattered if you had known the truth? I asked. He thought for a long moment. I'd like to think so, but honestly, I was a different person back then. Success and money were all that mattered. He glanced around my home, looking at what you've built all on your own. It makes me realize how misguided my priorities were. What will you do now? I asked. I'm going to have a very difficult conversation with my wife, he said grimly. And then I'm probably going to contact a divorce attorney. The financial deceptions are too great to ignore. I felt a surprising pang of sorrow for my sister. For all her faults, I had never wished for her marriage to fail. I meant what I said about the education funds for the kids. I told him. Regardless of what happens between you and Veronica. He nodded, his gratitude palpable. They'd like that. They'd like to get to know their aunt, especially James. He's really getting into programming. After Daniel left to retrieve the children, Isabella and I began to clean up. Well, she said, stacking glasses in the dishwasher. That was, without a doubt, the most dramatic housewarming I have ever attended. I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt lighter than anything I had felt in years. Not exactly the closure I was expecting, but it's closure nonetheless. Do you think they'll try to contact you again? She asked. Mom and Veronica, eventually. When they need something, I said, closing the dishwasher. But this time I'll be ready. No more doormat Lena. As the last guest departed and a peaceful silence settled over my new home, I walked through each room, taking in what I had built. It was more than a physical structure. It was a testament to a life I had forged through grit, hard work, and the courage to finally stand up for myself when it mattered most. The days following the housewarming were surprisingly peaceful. I had braced myself for a storm from Mom and Veronica, angry calls, manipulative texts, perhaps even an unannounced visit. Instead, there was only silence. Daniel called and asked to meet at a coffee shop. Veronica has moved in with your mother. He informed me over lattes 3 days later. She took the kids for now, but we've agreed to 50-50 custody while we sort things out. I'm sorry about your marriage, I said, and I meant it. He shrugged, looking both exhausted and relieved. After what you revealed at your party, I started digging deeper into our finances. It's worse than you know. We're not just struggling, we're on the verge of bankruptcy. How is that possible? You had a great job at that investment firm. He corrected. I was laid off 6 months ago, downsizing. I've been working as a freelance consultant, but I'm making about a third of my old salary. All the while, Veronica kept spending as if nothing had changed. He pushed a folder across the table. These are statements from accounts I never even knew existed. Maxed out credit cards, personal loans I never signed for, a second mortgage on the house before we sold it. Looking through the documents, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She did to you what she and Mom did to me, I said. Only on a much larger scale, he confirmed grimly. We're talking hundreds of thousands in debt. What will you do? Bankruptcy seems unavoidable, he admitted. I nodded, understanding all too well. My offer for the kids' education fund still stands. I can set them up in trusts that can only be used for tuition and school expenses. That would mean the world, he said, his voice thick with genuine gratitude. And maybe you could spend some time with them. They could really use some stable adults in their lives right now. That conversation was the start of a new, tentative chapter for me, Daniel, and the children. They were smart, curious kids, navigating their parents' split with surprising resilience. About 2 weeks after the party, Dad invited me to dinner. Over pasta, he finally opened up about his role in our family's years of dysfunction. I failed you, he said, his voice raw with honesty. After the divorce, Margaret made it impossible to stay in touch, but that's just an excuse. I should have fought harder to be in your life. Why didn't you? I asked, the question I'd held inside for 14 years. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Guilt, mostly. The divorce was my fault. I was having an affair with my second wife before I left. Margaret knew, and she used it as leverage to control everything, including my access to you girls. That revelation recontextualized my entire childhood, though it didn't excuse his absence. I also failed to protect your college fund, he continued. It was in a joint account with Margaret's name on it. I trusted her to do the right thing despite our history. By the time I found out what she'd done, I was too ashamed to face you. You could have helped me, I said quietly, when I was sleeping in my car. I didn't know, he insisted. Margaret told me you'd moved in with a friend from school. By the time I learned the truth, months had passed and you had stopped answering my calls. We talked for hours that night, untangling years of misconceptions, half-truths, and outright lies. Dad wasn't blameless, but I came to see that he had been manipulated by Mom almost as much as I had been. Your mother wasn't always like this, he explained. After Veronica was born, something shifted in her. She became obsessed with giving her this perfect life, often at your expense. I tried to balance things, to advocate for you, but it just led to more conflict. Why the favoritism? I asked, the question that had haunted my childhood. He considered it carefully. I think Veronica reminded Margaret of the person she wanted to be. Popular, socially graceful, conventional. You were always more like me. Analytical, independent, a questioner. And I think that scared her. The first contact from Veronica came 2 days after my dinner with Dad. It was a long, rambling email that swung wildly between apology and justification. She admitted to the identity theft, but blamed it on financial desperation and Mom's influence. She apologized for the scene at the housewarming, but maintained that her family's needs were more important than my luxury. Classic Veronica, Isabella noted when I read it to her. The non-apology apology. At least she's acknowledging it happened, I said, feeling a surprising sense of charity now that I was safe from her chaos. That's a start. Mother's approach was more direct. She started calling daily, leaving voicemails that veered from furious accusations to tearful pleas. Families are supposed to forgive, she cried in one message. We made mistakes, but so did you, embarrassing us in front of all your fancy friends. I didn't answer either of them immediately, instead working with my therapist, Dr. Jennifer Blake, on establishing firm boundaries. Your mother and sister display classic patterns of narcissistic and manipulative behavior, Doctor. Blake explained. They are accustomed to you eventually capitulating. Your sustained boundary setting is a new, threatening behavior to them. I feel guilty sometimes, I admitted. Especially for the kids caught in the middle. That's natural, she assured me. But remember, you're modeling healthy behavior for those children. And you're supporting them directly with the education funds and by spending quality time with them. That is real family support, not the transactional, conditional version you grew up with. Over the next few months, Daniel and Veronica's situations deteriorated. Their divorce proceedings unearthed even more financial deceptions. Daniel filed for bankruptcy as he'd planned. Veronica and the children remained crammed into Mom's small house, a tense and volatile environment. 6 months after the housewarming, Daniel landed a better job with a smaller firm and rented a 3-bedroom apartment. The custody agreement was finalized, giving him the children every other week. On his weeks, I made it a point to visit, helping James with his coding projects or just being another supportive adult. During one of those visits, Daniel mentioned Veronica had started therapy. Her lawyer suggested it might look good in the divorce proceedings, he said. I'm skeptical, but it's a step. Around that time, I finally agreed to meet Mom for coffee. The conversation was strained but civil. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 6 months. Living with Veronica and the children, it's impossible, she confessed. There's no privacy, no quiet. And her spending habits, she trailed off, shaking her head. You enabled those habits, I pointed out, not unkindly. I just wanted her to have everything I never did, Mom said, a rare flicker of self-awareness. I grew up poor, wore hand-me-downs, never had nice things. I swore my daughter would have better. You had 2 daughters, I reminded her gently. She had the grace to look ashamed. I know. I told myself you were the strong one, the independent one, that you didn't need as much help. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest I was ever likely to get. This decades-long pattern of financial deception taught me that Mom's behavior was more than just favoritism. It revealed underlying concerns of control, entitlement, and possibly untreated mental health problems. Meanwhile, Veronica's therapy seemed to be having some effect. Our weekly dinners with the kids began to feel less awkward, almost pleasant. She found a job as an administrative assistant, her first real job since she'd married, and eventually moved into a small apartment of her own when living with Mom became financially and emotionally untenable. I never learned how to stand on my own 2 feet, she admitted during one of our dinners. Mom always did everything for me. Then Daniel did. When it all fell apart, I had no idea how to function. I felt an unexpected wave of pity watching her grapple with basic adult responsibilities like budgeting and meal planning. In her own way, Veronica had also been a victim of Mom's dysfunction. Her status as the golden child had crippled her, leaving her without resilience or self-sufficiency. The children adjusted to their new reality with remarkable adaptability. James, now 11, flourished in a coding club I enrolled him in. Freya discovered a passion for science that neither of her parents had ever noticed. Caleb's love for dinosaurs blossomed into a broader interest in natural history. I formally established the college funds for each of them, stipulating that they could only be accessed for educational purposes, a firewall to prevent history from repeating itself. Daniel and I developed an unlikely friendship, built on a foundation of mutual respect. He faced the financial disaster head-on, slowly rebuilding his credit and career, and became a more engaged father than he had ever been. The bankruptcy was humbling, he admitted. This was a truer version of Daniel. Not all relationships, however, could be mended. Mom continued to deflect true accountability, oscillating between shallow apologies and subtle justifications. During one particularly trying lunch, she suggested my success was partly due to her tough love approach. If we hadn't pushed you out of the nest, would you have found the same drive? She mused, as if my period of homelessness was a calculated parenting strategy, not an act of abandonment. I set my fork down carefully. That's like saying abuse builds character. Some people survive despite it, not because of it. I succeeded in spite of how you treated me, not because of it. She quickly changed the subject, always allergic to direct confrontation. These interactions confirmed Dr. Blake's assessment. While Mom might modify her behavior to maintain contact, true remorse or insight was unlikely to ever materialize. Some people lack the capacity for the deep self-reflection required for genuine change, Dr. Blake told me. You can adjust your expectations accordingly and decide what kind of limited relationship, if any, serves your well-being. By the 1-year anniversary of moving into my house, I had established a new equilibrium. Monthly lunches with Veronica and the kids, occasional, brief coffees with Mom, regular dinners with Dad, and more frequent, quality time with the kids on Daniel's custody weeks. To mark the anniversary, I hosted a small gathering, the antithesis of the previous year's grand, dramatic party. Isabella came with her new fiancé. Professor Hughes and her husband were there. Dad brought his now serious girlfriend, Laura. Daniel brought the kids for a few hours. Even Veronica stopped by for a short civil visit. Mom was a conspicuous absence, a choice she made after I refused to invite a few of her toxic friends whom she insisted on bringing. It was a small but significant victory in boundary maintenance. As the evening wound down and we sat on the patio with dessert, James came over with his laptop. "Aunt Lena, can you look at this code? I'm trying to build a game, but the graphics aren't rendering right." We sat together on the porch swing, debugging his JavaScript as fireflies began to blink in the twilight. That simple, normal moment, an aunt helping her nephew, family supporting one another in a healthy, constructive way, brought a sudden sting of tears to my eyes, which I quickly blinked away. "Are you okay?" James asked, noticing my emotion. "More than okay," I told him. "Just happy to be here." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I walked through my quiet house, a space that was truly and completely mine. It had become a sanctuary, not just from the outside world, but from the toxic family dynamics that had almost broken me. Within these walls, I had forged new traditions, new connections, and a new definition of family, one built on respect, not obligation, on support, not manipulation. My journey from sleeping in my car at 18 to owning this beautiful home at 32 was never just about money. It was about reclaiming my own worth, drawing immovable lines in the sand, and building a life that was aligned with my values, not with the expectations of others. My relationship with my birth family would likely always be complicated. Mom may never fully grasp the damage she caused. Veronica's capacity for growth may have its limits. Dad's apologies could not erase years of absence, but I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. The scared 18-year-old who drove away from her home with nowhere to go had found not only security but strength. She had learned that family is sometimes who you choose, not who you are born to, and that standing in your own truth, no matter how difficult, is the only path to authentic connection. As I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars emerge in the summer sky, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. Home, in every sense of the word.